Good evening. My name is Dave Frankowski, and I'll be your moderator for this evening's class. And welcome to the Institute of Divine Metaphysical Research. This is a school and not a church, and neither are we affiliated with any religious organization. This school is a non-profit, non-denominational, religious and scientific research organization dedicated to showing proof of the existence of Yahweh our Elohim and the operation of his eternal purpose, pattern, and plan operating throughout eternity to this present day. This school was established as a result of a divine vision and revelation given unto our founder, Dr. Henry Clifford Kinley, in the state of Ohio in the year of 1931. We are incorporated in the state of California in the year of 1958. We hold classes in the United States and various other countries. The Oceanside branch was established in 1994. At this time, I'd like to introduce you to the Dean of the Oceanside branch, Dr. Dennis Volpe, and the President, Dr. Carl Emler. Now, in this school, we use the true, correct, and original name of our son, the original Hebrew text. The title of it has been improperly substituted by God. Of a physical body is Yahshua substituted by Jesus. Now, but we now know that Elohim is a title, but it is an erroneous name on your part in dictionary or in either the Hebrew or any character by this letter James as Jesus. Now Yahweh is pure spirit, and in this state, symbolized on this chart as a cloud, to paper form. And we use this chart to show that everything on this chart, and in like manner, the universe abides within the pure spirit of Yahweh. Ask ourselves is, what was the name of the Savior when he walked on the earth plane? And a further understanding of this name and title can be had by reading the preface of the Holy Name Bible. Also in this school, we teach by the divine pattern of the universe. And it's the divine pattern because it's Yahweh's pattern. After Yahweh led the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt, he called Moses on top of Mount Sinai, and he showed him this tabernacle pattern in a vision. Later on, Yahweh instructed Moses to build one exactly like it in the wilderness of Sinai. The tabernacle pattern is a threefold pattern, and it consists of a most holy place, a holy place, and a court round about. These three compartments make up the one tabernacle pattern. In this school, we show proof that everything in the universe is made and operates according to the structure and function of this tabernacle pattern, and that nothing escapes the pattern. The 10 primary aims of the Institute are as follows. 1, to help you find and know Yahweh our Elohim as he really is and actually exists. 2, to form a nucleus of universal brotherhood of humanity in Yahshua the Messiah, without distinction of race, caste, or color. 3, spirit law, or so-called. 4, to 6, learn, know, purpose through sensations and ages. To discern, or Satan and his demons, operating the mystery. 8, to earnestly contend for the children of Yahweh. 9, from the beginning there is no other name given can be saved. And 10, now in the kingdom of Yahweh. Evening with a prayer by Dr. Bruce Geller and chapter read by Jerry.
We are so thankful that you have given us the truth, love of the truth, caused us to hear the truth upon us. Meditation of and thank you in Yahshua the Messiah, who...
Good evening, class. Tonight I'll be reading Acts the 17th chapter from the Holy Name Bible. Now when they had passed through Amphipolis and Apollonia, they came to Thessalonica, where there was a synagogue of the Jews. And Saul, as his manner was, went unto them, and 3 Sabbath days reasoned with them out of the Scriptures, opening and alleging that the Messiah must needs have suffered, and be risen again from the dead, and that this Yahshua, said he, whom I preach unto you, is the Messiah. And some of them believed and consorted with Saul and Silas, and of the devout Greeks a great multitude, and of the chief women not a few. But the Jews which believed not, moved with envy, took unto them certain lewd fellows of the baser sort, and gathered a company, and set all the city on an uproar, and assaulted the house of Jason, and sought to bring them out to the people. And when they found them not, they drew Jason and certain brethren unto the rulers of the city, crying, These that have turned the world upside down are come hither also, whom Jason hath received, and these all do contrary to the decrees of Caesar, saying that there is another king, one Yahshua. And they troubled the people and the rulers of the city when they heard these things. And when they had taken security of Jason and of the others, they let them go. And the brethren immediately sent away Saul and Silas by night. Thither went into the synagogue those in Thessalonica. It were to the sea, but Silas and Timothy were still. Synagogue with the Jews and with the persons, and in the market daily with them that met with him. And served with men's hands, as though we needed anything, seeing that he giveth to all life and breath and all things, and hath made of one blood all nations of men for to dwell on all the face of the earth, and hath determined the times before appointed and the bounds of their habitation, that they should seek him, if haply they might feel after him and find him, though he be not far from every one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being, as some of your own poets have said, for we are also his offspring. Forasmuch then as we are the offspring of Yahweh, we ought not to think that gold or silver or stone graven by art and man's device can be like the Most High. In the times of this ignorance Yahweh winked at, but now commandeth all men everywhere to repent, because he hath appointed a day in which he will judge the world in righteousness by that man who he hath ordained. Wherefore he hath given proof unto all men, in that he raised him from the dead. And when they heard of the resurrection of the dead, some mocked, and others said, Will we hear thee again of this matter? So Saul departed from among them. Howbeit certain men clave unto him, and believed, among the which was Dionysus, the Areopagite, and a woman named Demarius, and others with them. Acts, the 17th chapter. It's with sadness that I say goodbye to Callie and Fidel. They're going back to Madison, Wisconsin. and we're going to miss you already. It seems like you just got here, but we were so glad to see you, and please send our love back to our frozen friends back there in Madison.
One quick announcement before we get started this evening. For information about the Oceanside class, or for questions arising from an Oceanside class broadcast lecture, please email us at oceansideclassidmr@gmail.com or leave a voicemail or text message at 442-264-7388. Please limit your questions to items directly discussed during one of our lectures and include the class date and speaker with your questions. Most questions will be answered at future classes. And our scripture readers will be myself and Callie and possibly Bruce. And our first speaker will be Callie Gagne.
Hello.
Hello, Cal.
Let's just grab that. I don't know if I'll be up here for very long. But I am very happy to be here, and it's always nice to come out to warm weather when your home is frozen. And it's always nice to commune with the brethren anywhere you go, because it just kind of gets the blood pumping, metaphorically speaking, literally speaking sometimes, but mostly metaphorically, just to get that spiritual circulation going, and the meeting of the minds and all that kind of stuff. Because when you're out in the world in your day-to-day jobs, you don't always get to focus on class or really take the time to think about Yahweh, and that's why we come to class. So that's why it's an important thing to go to class, because then you can be surrounded by that and be among people that see this thing just like you do. Because I've always thought that it should be obvious. Apparently it's not, because most of the people you bring don't stick around. But I guess growing up in class, I'm a little biased because I always was here. I mean, not always. Physically, I was always here. Spiritually, I don't think I was always here, but yeah. Anyway, so it's just, I guess what's coming to my mind is it's just baffling to me that people don't see this thing, because it seems so obvious and simple and whatever, but when you read about the people in this scripture here, you see how many people Paul was going among talking to about it, and only some people saw it. Not everybody saw it. And that's how it's supposed to be, obviously, but it's still baffling to those of us that are on the in crowd, I think. Which is probably the only time I felt like I was in the in crowd. Such a loser, no. But I just, for example, I brought my boyfriend to class, and he comes to class now, and I was actually very amazed that he stayed, because I brought a lot of my friends since the time I was a little girl to this thing, and I used to get very excited to bring people to class, and now each time I've gotten more and more skeptical, and like I want them really bad, but I try to like play this like game in my head, like, no, I want it too much. Now that I want it too much, they're not going to see it, and I can't be overthinking it. Maybe I shouldn't even be there when they're there, because then I'm just going to psych myself out. Like, I don't know, like, it just is a beautiful thing when you can bring someone to see it. Long story short. But this scripture also brings up one thing that I was talking somewhat about recently. I'm assuming it was while I was here, but I don't remember. But we were talking about the different attributes and how they can be perverted very easily, and one of them is knowledge, and that's what they're talking about here, that the Athenians were really into knowledge, and just any knowledge that you can absorb of any kind and all kinds and everything there is to know about anything. They were just saying that the philosophers and everybody liked to hang around and know new things. Mm-hmm. It said in 16 or 17 or somewhere in there. And that's kind of how it feels today with how technology is. Everybody just has knowledge at their fingertips, and so much of it that I was like saying to my mom, I was looking up reviews on something online, and it was like, I don't even know what to believe, because they were split in half. Like, there is a bajillion of good sources that say this, and there's just as many quality sources that say that now. Mm-hmm. So how am I supposed to know what's right and what's wrong anymore? And you're just so overloaded by information that you can't figure out the truth. You're obsessed more with the information than with the truth at this point. I feel like sometimes when you talk to people about class, they're like, that's cool. But when they see that all you talk about is death, burial, resurrection, blood, water, spirit, 40 in a bajillion of different manifestations, they think that that's lame, that's not enough knowledge to be gained, or whatever. That's like one iota of knowledge of things that you can learn. I need to be able to open my consciousness and see into like I don't know, like I'm imagining some hippie guy like talking about Buddha and just being like, you gotta, like, I can reincarnate myself and just go into the, like, you know, that just like overloading on knowledge instead of seeing quality witnesses and either deciding whether or not you're going to accept those witnesses or not. I don't know. How do you know what's... I guess Yahweh has to reveal it to you, or show that to you, or else you are just going to keep looking. And it just is baffling every day to me that I am here. I think that I got into the wrong room somehow. Like, I was supposed to go down the hall, and I got lost and ended up here. But I'm very happy by the mistake. So, thank you. That's all I have for today. Sorry I don't have more.
And our next speaker will be the president of the Oceanside branch, Dr. Carl Emler.
Good evening, everyone. I hope people are still out there after all our trials and tribulations with our internet. I'm being assured we're okay now, so we'll see how it goes. But problems are not ours. Problems belong to a cell tower that's not being responsive, so bear with us. I know in years past the problems were all ours, and so it was frustrating, but now it's not. I want to talk a little bit about what Kelly was inferring, which is essentially the state of people trying to know whether what they think they know is really anything worth knowing, and if there is anything worth knowing. Now, I know I've kind of chopped it up a little bit, but really people, you know, we deal with a lot of people who come into class and absolutely believe that God exists because they were raised Roman Catholic or Lutheran or something, and they loved Christmas and all the rest of the stuff, and so God was very important to them. And then we have a handful of people who, you know, have been through the God thing and are over it because they don't see any way to be able to see God. You know, we went to a Scientology introductory meeting back in 1971. I was going to say many years ago, but there you have it, okay? Back in 1971. And we sat there for the longest time and listened to their presentation. And then they asked if there were any questions afterwards. And so we asked questions. We were on our way to the 1971 International Convention in Los Angeles, California. And we had been in class many weeks. I mean, some of us came into class in like the fall of 1970 when we're in a car in June of 1971. That's many weeks. You understand? But we were tired. It was in Albuquerque, I think, New Mexico, and we were a ragtag bunch of tired, miserable people who had slept in a library of the university there in Albuquerque because we couldn't find a comfortable chair anyplace else to sleep. And we didn't want to get on the highway until dark because we were heading for the desert, and we did not want to go through the desert during the day. For those younger people, we did not have air conditioning because it just didn't come in your car. So we chose to go through the desert at night. So the upshot was, we had an evening we needed to spend before stuff happened, and so we went to a Scientology lecture. And we sat there and listened patiently. Well, some of us were patient. And then we started asking questions about what they had said. And they took us into the back room. All of a sudden I'm transported there. They took us into the back room because we were asking questions that they were scrambling to answer. And it's because we knew something about something that they thought they knew something about, but did not have tangible explanations based on observational evidence to establish what it is that they believe. They had been told something, and they embraced what they had been told, and that's what they were committed to. At great financial distress, I might add.
Right.
So at that time in 1971, in order for you to complete the course of Scientology, it was going to cost upwards of $100,000. We established that. Because one of us made the comment, well, and then they said that in order to convert the world from the state of ignorance that it was in to a state of awareness and knowledge of who they really are, and I may get into that in a minute, but I may not. We'll see, because it's outrageous, and it's really not where I want to go. But in order for them to attain the fullness of their experience of a spiritual nature, everybody on the planet had to get there.
Right.
$100,000 a piece. And so one of us asked the question, well, what about the single woman with kids on welfare? How are they going to afford $100,000? And the answer was, they can cut back on how much they spend on food. In other words, they could trim money off, whatever it is they're getting in, and come up with enough money to start the coursework. And it may take their lifetime, but, you know, this is what they had to do. They had to come to the 12th level of understanding of the nature of the spirit beings that they were, called Thetans. And so we challenged them about what spirit was and how do you know. And they went into this whole thing about how, well, when you get up into this level, the 12th level of Scientology, of being a Thetan, then you will know essentially that you are God, that you are spirit. And so we asked, did anybody completed that? Got there? And of course they said yes, because their leader, L. Ron Hubbard, was one of them. And I said, well, what's the evidence? Well, their comment was, and this is very similar to Roman Catholicism in a sense, and I'll tell you why, that they said that they could postulate things. Remember postulating? And to postulate something, say you wanted a coffee table, you could create a coffee table. They called it postulating. You postulate it, meditate on it, and it would appear. A coffee table. You know. Now I said that that's very similar to Roman Catholicism, because Roman Catholicism says that God essentially postulated the creation we live in, and what I mean by that is they get that God created it from nothing. Okay. Which is the same thing that the Scientologists were saying. So we scrambled back and forth, and they made some kind of a comment, I'm forgetting exactly what it was, but how they needed to go into the other books for us.
Yeah.
Because our questions were so deep. We were heavier than most people. We had been in class many, 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 many weeks. None of us had been in class a year by the time we were on this road trip. See, at least those of us who were on the trip. So what this boils down to, and it's similar to Kelly's experience and feeling about how things go with respect to trying to understand something about Yahweh, and how they go is this. Is Yahweh real? Is the stuff we're talking about in this class actually real? Or is it just another philosophy that you run across, like Buddhism or Scientology or anything else? Prior to coming into this class, I would say, well, that's a valid question. Is this any more real than anything else? Because I was of the feeling that, you know, it didn't really matter what you believed, everybody goes to heaven, because God, you know, likes everybody but Hitler. And his kid. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you have to really think hard about who, you know, the Jehovah's Witnesses was come to our house. They were fine people, and they liked God, and they had the Bible, and so there's no problem with them. And my mother was a Catholic, my father was a Lutheran, so I checked both those boxes, you know, and then you go on and you run into the Hare Krishnas or the, you know, and that, and they, you know, they're doing their thing. That's fine. They're not stabbing people and robbing them. They're trying to push their religion on you, so you try to get away from them in the airport, and, you know, you skirt them in the airport, but as far as God is concerned, let them go. They're no problem. They'll be there too eventually, because who knows who's there? I mean, in heaven. The thing that I never said in my mind was, who knows who's there in heaven, if there is a heaven? Mm-hmm. Never occurred to me to stop and ask myself, if there is a heaven. You know, it was just a default. Yeah. Okay. And when I came through this class, it was the first time that I was challenged, sincerely challenged, with whether or not what you understood about God is valid. Now, my understanding about God, as far as I had, came from reading the Bible. And so, is it a valid place to go to read the Bible and get something about God out of the Bible? See, Buddhists don't read the Bible, I don't think.
No, they don't.
You know, so they get their understanding from the writings of Buddha. That's the Bhagavad Gita or something.
Yeah.
Bhagavad.
Yeah.
Bhagavad. I forget. I have to see it written in order to be able to pronounce it. But you know, they have these writings that describe in analogies and stories how they think God exists. And of course, you know, the Greeks had a whole pantheon of gods that described to them how God existed. And these gods, for instance, that they had in the Greek pantheon, all were gods that were associated with manifestations of things that happened in the world. You know, so you'd have the god of thunder, and you have the god of the sea, and so everything that they tactily experience in the physical creation, they assumed that there was something behind it that ruled it or something, and that was this God. So, what I've tried to do is just paint this whole picture for you of what's out there, as well as there's nothing. You know, you are a product of evolution, a bunch of chemicals rattled together over time, and you think you are, and you're, you know, all you are is a bunch of neurological, biochemical pathways. And when those biochemical pathways stop, so do you, and that's it. That's the end of the game. So that's what we're dealing with down here as far as the Creator is concerned, trying to understand for real something about the ever-presence of Yahweh. And, you know, the first aim, Bruce, you have that memorized.
I do.
Please.
To help you find and know Yahweh our Elohim as he really is and actually exists.
Now, what we're trying to do is to help you find Yahweh, and then it says our Elohim.
Right.
And we want you to find that as he really is,
Yeah.
and as he actually exists. Now, let's go over to the 24th chapter of Exodus for a moment. Now, the 24th chapter of Exodus, and I know I got a lot of things out there with the Scientologists and everything else, but what I want to do is let you know that you can ask a good question. I wanted to say cogent, but it's a word not everybody's familiar with, but a solid question that you should expect to be able to get answered. You can ask that about God. We could not ask that to the Scientologists.
Right.
Because they could not come up with a mechanism for their concept of thetans.
Mm-hmm.
Their concept of thetans were that they were aliens who had created the planet for a means of entertainment. They had nothing better to do. They were going to say, let's play, and I think this is essentially how they worded it. Let's play physical creation.
Yep.
And it's like a video game. And so they created the planet, and then they created bodies for them to exist on the planet and experience the creation in these bodies. But along the way, they forgot what they were doing.
Yep.
And really thought they were the physical bodies that were walking on the planet, when in fact they were thetans incarnated in these bodies, and they were ignorant of it, and they were going to be stuck in these bodies, in this creation, until they realized that.
Mm-hmm.
Is that pretty close, Dennis?
That's about right.
And so when you ask some kind of question about that, there's no way that they can give you an answer that's reasonable because it's a fabrication. Okay? Because they can't show you a thetan because they're all stuck in physical bodies and are forgotten that's who they are and you can't see them. And they can't show you someone who's postulating because L. Ron Hubbard could and he's disappeared off the face of the earth. The man disappeared. Okay? And they say that they could levitate.
Yeah.
You know, and well, let's see someone levitate. Well, we're not up at that level yet. You know? Well, have you ever seen anyone levitate? Well, no. Do you understand? They have this fable, this idea, and there's just no way that they can offer you any kind of evidence. Now look at, our first aim is to help you find and know Yahweh. 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 Our Elohim. That tells you who our Elohim is. Our Elohim is Yahweh. Now I'm making this statement because it's important to be able to understand the operation of the Godhead. And it's also important to understand that although we speak with respect to spirit as though it were divided, that it is not a divided spirit. Yahweh is Yahweh. And Yahweh manifests himself in a couple of different ways that we're going to get to. But regardless, it is still Yahweh. Doesn't change. There's one spirit, and that spirit takes action. And one of the actions it takes is to take on a shape and form that is called Elohim. Now we want to help you find and know Yahweh, our Elohim. So Elohim is something that has to do with our, I'll say it like this, and this is not what I mean, but I'm going to say it because I need to move. Elohim is Yahweh in a form, I hate to say it, but I have to that can interact with us in a conscious level. There. Now, it's more than that, but I'm just trying to get you to understand that there's an operation there. And so Yahweh takes on this shape and form, and in doing so, he's capable of communicating with his creation. Now, the 24th chapter of Exodus. Go ahead.
24:1. And he said unto Moses, Come up unto Yahweh, you, Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel, and worship you afar off. And Moses alone shall come near Yahweh, but they shall not come nigh, neither shall the people go up with him. And Moses came and told the people all the words of Yahweh, and all the judgments.
Read.
And all the people answered with one voice, and said, All the words which Yahweh has said will we do.
Now, that's depicted here on this chart. And we all always jump right up to here. But what I want you to realize is that Moses has gotten instruction before this whole thing happened to actually accomplish this. In other words, get 70 guys together, and Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, and bring them up into the middle of the mountain. And Moses alone is going to go up into the top of the mountain. And he's given the covenant because he speaks it to the people down here even before all of this stuff happens. Okay, now that's what we're reading here. But now watch. So, read on.
Then 4. And Moses wrote all the words of Yahweh, and rose up early in the morning, and builded an altar under the
So
hill.
I'm just going to cut this up real quick. So Moses writes the words of this covenant in a book. He gathers the people together, and he sprinkles the people and the book with the blood of sheep and goats. Okay. And so that's so Moses had to get that information, and what you find is that that's Moses' first trip to this mountain to have a discussion with Yahweh, is when he gets that covenant and he writes it in the book. And this is before the Ten Commandment law in the stone. This is the covenant given right from the start. Before he gets the Ten Commandments that he breaks, before he goes back a second time with the Ten Commandments that he writes on the tables of stone, this is a trip into the mountain where he gets that covenant. And he writes it in a book. And it's consecrated amongst the people and the book. So essentially, this law that we refer to as the law of Moses precedes all of this stuff that's going on up here. So you have a law that precedes them even knowing what we're going to get to in the end of this chapter about this thing having hands, feet, and a body, this Yahweh Elohim up here. See? Now, so chop up back what I've already said so we don't have to read that as far as sprinkling the book and the people and all the rest of the stuff, and move on. You maybe, I don't know.
9.
Go
Then
ahead.
went up Moses, Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel.
So now here we're accomplishing the thing that was said to Moses after Moses had presented the people with this law. See? Now go ahead.
And they saw the Elohim of Israel.
Read.
And there was under his feet, as it were, a paved work of a sapphire stone.
So he had feet, we say, and it was on a paved work of a sapphire stone. Read.
And as it were, the body of heaven in his clearness.
And we say he had a body of heaven in its clearness. Read.
And upon the nobles of the children of Israel he laid not his hand.
And he had hands. So we realized by just reading this that whatever it is they saw there, it had hands, feet, and a body. Okay. Now go over into Genesis, probably 126.
126 of Genesis. And Elohim said, let us make man in our image.
Now, what I want you to see here is that our first aim is to help you find and know Yahweh, our Elohim. Now you're in Genesis, and it's talking about Elohim, and it doesn't say in there Yahweh Elohim, but that's who it is. This is Yahweh, our Elohim, who's speaking here.
Yes.
And he says what?
He said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness.
Now here's what Yahweh Elohim said. Now we're going to make man. Let us make man in our image, in our likeness. Read.
And let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth.
Let them be king over everything. Now remember, he's making man in his likeness and in his image. So therefore, he's got to make him king over everything in the creation. Why?
Because he is.
Because he's Yahweh, our Elohim, is actually the ruler and king over everything. So if he's going to make man in his likeness and in his image, he's going to make man the king or the ruler over everything.
Yeah.
Read.
Over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. So Elohim created man in his own image.
Now this is what he did. He created man in his own image. Read.
In the image of Elohim created he him. Male and female created he them. And Elohim blessed them. And Elohim said unto them, be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth.
All right, we're going to stop there. Because what I want you to see is that what you read over here in Exodus, you read about feet, you read about hands, and you read about a body, but it's pretty vague. All right. When you read over here in Genesis, which Moses wrote Genesis, and it says it on the it says it on the top of your book, the first book of Moses by Genesis, first book of
Genesis.
Right.
Moses called Genesis. So that's what it says at the top of the book.
Yeah.
And so we read over that and say Moses wrote Genesis. Never give it a thought as to how could Moses have written Genesis. Where did he get that information from? And Dennis talked about this last Saturday, about an actual minister who said that Moses got that information from campfire stories, passed down from generation to generation. Hey. Now look at, in Exodus, the 24th chapter, it tells you that Moses went up into this cloud. Okay. It tells you that in this cloud, before Moses went up there, they saw the God of Israel.
Right.
And then Moses disappears in the burning cloud. And these guys hang out for a little bit of time and then say, we don't know when he's coming back. Let's go down. Let's get out of here. Do you understand? And so, and this is a burning cloud, is what you read. And so as far as these people are concerned, Moses went up into an inferno of a cloud, and we never saw nothing after that. And we waited for, it doesn't tell you how long he waited, but you know, there was no other food. I don't think they had a backpack with food and stuff, so they started getting hungry. So by the time they got hungry enough, it's let's get out of here and go down and get something to eat. So they go down here, and then they're still hanging out. Because look at, Moses is gone for 40 days and 40 nights. You know when a little kid leaves the house in the middle of the night, and it's cold, and he gets lost in the woods? After about 7 days, you figure the kid's dead.
Yeah.
You know, now just recently, they had a kid who was gone for like 3 days? 3 days, and it was cold,
Yes.
you know, and it was, they found the kid. Tangled in weeds and, you know, no worse for wear considering what he had been through. But he would not have lasted 40 days and 40 nights.
Right.
That's my point. So they just figured Moses was dead because they had no idea of anything that was going on with respect to this cloud. Now I want you to see this. As soon as Moses went into this cloud, they lost sight of him and did not see him again until he came out of the cloud. So as far as they were concerned, Moses was dead. He'd been gone for 40 days. Mm-hmm. Now Moses comes out of this cloud carrying the first tables of stone. And by this time they had built a golden calf and they were having some kind of a party going on here, you know. And Moses sees this and he's angry. Moses is thinking, I was just gone a day. These people scrambled down the mountain and put together a golden calf. What's the story here? He's upset. Do you understand? So he throws that thing down and I'm done with you guys. Now, the scenario that I painted is this. See? What is happening in the book that you call the Bible, that you're reading? That is a great mystery. And it's not a surprise that anything about spirit or anything about God is a mystery because you didn't walk in the door knowing anything about God. You may have had a good feeling in your heart. You may have thought he's a Trinity, and you may have thought but you didn't know anything because we want to help you find and know Yahweh, our Elohim, as he really is and actually exists. And you knew how the Catholics thought he was, or how the Lutherans thought he was, or how the Jews thought he was. And this 17th chapter of Acts, the 17th chapter, you two, I got Lil and Alice back here.
Yeah.
I'll let that soak for a while.
Oh.
See, these are two people that we knew in the early 1970s who would sit in the back and just chatter back and forth. Anyways, back to this idea of as far as what you bring in, as far as a knowledge of your creators, what was given to you by people who did not know anything about God. These Scientologists had never met anybody who postulated. They had never met anybody who levitated. You understand? They had never met any of this stuff. They read these books and paid this money and had this philosophy.
Yeah.
Okay? And the philosophy was that aliens were incarnated in these bodies and were forgotten about it and needed to be reminded. And these people, you know, they figured they were Thetans, okay? But they still felt they were people.
Yeah.
So they hadn't gotten to the point where they could escape the body. These people we talked to. And now Scientology is this big deal where you see the huge buildings that they have, and then this Miskevich or whatever his name is, the new head after L. Ron Hubbard is worshipped as the repository of all knowledge and understanding as far as Scientology is concerned. And throngs of people, see, stand and applaud every word that comes out of his mouth and throw tons of money at him.
Right.
See, that I can't get into it. It's just too insane. See, the amount of money that's involved. See, and people are willing to do it in order to have an enlightening. They will give up everything for that, including their own children.
Yeah.
Now, this thing that happened here, this is a great mystery. This is not just some story of Moses walking up into a mountain with 74 people and then Moses going up into a cloud, these people getting bummed out and coming down and figuring, well, we got to go back in here, so let's build a golden calf. All the things that they did when these 70 elders came down out of the midst of this mountain, it all made sense. It all made sense because Moses is dead, and he's the one who came down and gave us the name. He's the one that riled Pharaoh up to a point where Pharaoh was just going to kill them all, and then wound up putting Pharaoh in a hole. In other words, killed his firstborn and shut him down so that they could get a head start out of Egypt, because they got that 3-day journey head start, and then Pharaoh just said, no, this is it now. I buried my dad. I'm going after him. I'm not losing these people. Do you understand? So this is all that they knew was the manifestation that they had gone through. And they saw this Red Sea. Look at it. They saw this Red Sea open up and divide and Pharaoh being killed in there. But by the time they got to the point that I'm talking about now, that's probably about, 6 or 7 weeks. It took them that long, see, to put this out of their mind and say, look, Moses is gone, so now we got nothing.
Right.
We were down here. Moses alone came down here because Aaron was already down here, because Aaron left here and met Moses up in the wilderness. See, so when Moses came down, he was the only guy that wasn't living in Egypt at the time who was a Jew. At some point, Joshua was down here. Do you understand? And Aaron was remembered when he came back down with Aaron. You say, oh yeah, that's Aaron. He left. He was gone for a few weeks. We don't know where he went. Now he's here with this guy Moses. See, Moses has got this story that Yahweh has sent him to bring him up out of Egypt, and they're thrilled to get out of there. But then come to find out, there's all these plagues, and they get all this trouble and everything else. But my point is that all of this that happened to them was forgotten in a matter of 6 or 7 weeks. And it was forgotten because they didn't understand any of it. None of it was, look at, and here's what I'm getting at as far as this first name is concerned. None of what they experienced was real to them. It was just stuff that happened in their life. Now we're out here. Now what happened to our life? Moses is gone. So now we're going to build the golden calf and go back, because that's what we know. We're going back to what we know. They were just operating like blinders. They see the Red Sea's open. We're going to go through the Red Sea. And as soon as it closed, see, and they finished their song of victory, their mind was off it. They were moving on to the mountain. You understand? And as soon as this mountain thing failed, then they're going back down into Egypt. And it never occurred to them to consider what had happened here with this cloud and this Red Sea. It didn't have a strong enough effect on them to cause them to have a different attitude when they were up here with Moses. See, because here these guys saw hands, feet, and a body, for crying out loud. But it wasn't strong enough to give them a proper attitude in order to be able to overcome the questions that they had not been answered. Now, again, to help you find to know Yahweh our Elohim as he really is and actually exists. And the important thing is, as he really is, and as he actually exists. Because all I've said now is that all of this that happened to Israel wasn't actually as though it happened. To the people, it actually happened. We walked to this mountain. And for those of you who don't like walking and hiking in the woods, they had to do that. Yeah, they had to do that, or they'd be left sitting by the water all by themselves. You understand? But my point is, this is stuff that actually happened to them. The physical things actually happened to them. And I want you to know, you have physical things actually happening to you. See, you get in a car accident. It's a physical thing that actually happens to you. You understand? You run out of money. It's a physical thing that you don't get to have what you want. It's a physical thing that actually happens to you. Okay? That's how we operate in this creation. And that's how they were operating back here. But we want to know Yahweh our Elohim as he really is and as he actually exists. Now watch, let me move on. I got Genesis because I wanted to complete this body. And this body gets completed in Genesis by we made man in our likeness and image. So here I am. See, no one mentioned a head back here, but there's a head here, but no one mentioned a head. But they talked about a body, and you figure a body's got a head. Why? Because here you are. Yeah. See? So now you look at you, and you have a head, a chest, and an abdomen, and you have arms and legs, and you say this. That's what Yahweh Elohim looks like. Mm-hmm. And so on the top of the Sistine Chapel, see, with the finger towards Adam, you understand, is a head, a body, and a chest, you know, arms and legs. Looks just like Adam, but older. Mm-hmm. Because God's the old man up above sun, moon, and stars. Mm-hmm. Jesus, on the other hand, is the young guy. Yeah. See? And he's down there on earth having a conversation with his dad up there in heaven. See? That's what you read. As far as you're concerned, that's what you read. And when you read that, see, you think, there's at least two there. God the Father, the old man up in heaven, and Jesus, his son. See? So there's two. See? And later on, see, you pick up the dove that comes at the baptism, see, and you don't read like a dove. That's what it. Someone get that real quick. Just the like a dove.
3 or 4:1:4. Almost the end of 3, isn't it?
3 and 16.
Matthew 3:16. Go ahead.
And Yahshua, when he was baptized, went up straightway out of the water. And lo, the heavens were opened unto him. And he saw the Spirit of Yahweh descended like a dove.
And he saw a dove descend on him.
No, descending like a dove.
No, he saw a dove.
He saw the Spirit of Yahweh.
People got the dove. Yeah. They break open that silver dollar that you find out in the ocean, see, and it's got little birds in it, doves. And they call that a proof of the Holy Spirit. I think there are 5 of them in there or something like that.
Yeah, I forget how many.
You understand? And it's all the rave in Florida, see, to have these little doves, see, yep, come out of this. And it's just the stupid animal's bones.
That's right.
But they look like little wings.
Mm-hmm.
See, they look like, they're Ys, I think. They're Y-shaped, so it's like wings.
Yep.
And that's dove. There's the dove. It's the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is a dove.
Right.
And you got the pictures of the dove, you know, with the little thing in its mouth and the little halo all over it and everything else like that. See? But this thing says that it descended like a dove.
Right.
And you need to know the difference between something that's like something and something that is something.
Right.
Okay, now watch. Hands, feet, and the body. So here we got like regular human legs and arms and a head and feet, right? But later on we tell you that, look at, this is man made in the image of Elohim by the pattern of the tabernacle. Now here you are, you understand? Because that's your intestines and that's your liver, see? And this is your heart. This is you. But what we have over here is a building. And where are the hands, feet, and a body there? But there are. Because if you get stuck on hands, feet, and a body, then you do not know Yahweh our Elohim as He really is and actually exists. And that's the problem out there in the world. See, they're reading this thing literally, and they're not understanding the principle or the spirit behind it. Because what you find is, see, that in this tabernacle, you have in the most holy place, you have an Ark of the Covenant with that two archangels on the mercy seat sitting on the Ark of the Covenant. In the Ark of the Covenant is a table of the law, a pot of manna, and Aaron's rod that budded, you see. And then there's a veil here, blue, purple, and scarlet. And in this building you come to an altar of incense, see, with 4 horns of blood on it, and incense that's burned with 4 main ingredients. You have a 7-branch golden candlestick, see, and you have a table of shewbread with 12 loaves of bread on it. You have another veil, and you come out here and you have this little cup thing was right at the door. This is the cup of holy anointing oil. You have a laver of water, and you have a altar of burnt offering with 4 points of blood on it. And that's what you have as far as this tabernacle. And I want you to recognize that this court roundabout is a court roundabout. It goes all the way around about the most holy place and the holy place. And that's what you got. And this is a better example of Yahweh our Elohim as He really is and actually exists than what you see up here. See? Because up here we show you the tabernacle, because what you're going to find out is that He transfigured or transformed into this threefold intangible tabernacle, which is how Moses knew about this tabernacle in order to be able to instruct the people on how to construct this tabernacle in the wilderness of Sinai. And this tabernacle in the wilderness of Sinai represented Yahweh Elohim in the people. The 3 tribes on one side camped here, 3 tribes on another side camped here, 3 tribes on another side camped here, and 3 sides on another side camped here. So that makes 3, 6, 9, and 12 tribes. Plus, there were tribes of the Levites camped within and between the tabernacle and between the tribes of the children of Israel. And so you had 24 gathered around this tabernacle here in the wilderness of Sinai. And this represents the body of Yahweh Elohim. This is Yahweh's body in the people, not an active force upon them. Okay? Because that's what Jehovah's Witnesses tell you, that the Spirit of God is an active force upon you. It's not actually in you. Now watch. See, if the Spirit of God, as far as the Jehovah's Witnesses are concerned, is not in you, what the heck is in you? Because people talk about having a soul. And that's something that's in you that you've never seen before. And sometimes you wonder, does a soul even exist? Or am I just a bag of chemicals walking around that's going to do its job, die, and fertilize a tree? And Pretty much.
Yeah.
You understand?
Mhm.
But what I want you to see is this, and I'm working in a direction, because the direction that I'm working in is this. In order for you to know Yahweh as He really is and actually exists, and I can say Yahweh, even though it's Yahweh Elohim you're going to know, but that Yahweh Elohim is Yahweh. It really is Yahweh. It is not possible to separate those two. And I hope I get a chance to get into that. But just let me say this. This is hands, feet, and a body. Every bit as much as this is hands, feet, and a body. See, because what we do is we take this that I described real quick and showed how you have a cloud up here and you have a cloud up here. You have Michael and Gabriel, warrior and messenger, and so the two main operations in the brain is motor and sensory. Motor means action and sensory means perception, you understand? So you have motor and sensory are the two main functions, conscious and mechanical functions of this brain. See, you have the law, the Ten Commandment law, which governs the operation of the people around this tabernacle. And the pituitary gland, see, which is located in a bone cavity, very similar in principle to this table, this Ark of the Covenant, see, and it has 10 hormones and these hormones govern the operation of this body. See? It grows hair on it, it matures muscles, it stops bones from elongating, it does all the things that are required in order to mature and to develop the body and to reproduce the body, because there are also hormones involved in ovulation and all these other kinds of things. Locked up in there. So this is a law that these cells obey, strictly obey. And why do they obey? Because they have the ability to respond to the hormone. And they can respond to the hormone because they have a receptor for it.
Yeah.
And if every cell had a receptor for certain hormones, your body would go crazy. So some of your hormones, there are some parts of your body, they have a receptor for, some of them, but others don't, so that if you want to develop secondary sex characteristics like growing hair and stuff like that, then the follicle cells will respond to that hormone, but all your skin cells won't, or you'd have hair growing out of all your skin cells. You'd be a furry ball of hair. So in order for Yahweh to put this body together so that it functions in such a manner that what is needed to occur occurs when it's needed to occur and where it's needed to occur, He directs certain cells to be able to respond to certain signals. And that's why you come into class, see, and some of you will respond to the fact that you breathe the name. And others, but they'll look at these covenants and say, I've just never seen anything like that before. And they'll respond to these covenants. You understand? We're talking about we are many members of a body. And some people just, as soon as you told them the tabernacle and the body, they were like floorboarded. I was in science. I was a biology major when I came into class in college. And someone went through the body tabernacle, and I thought, well, that's interesting. It never really struck me as being anything of any kind of importance. I just saw it as, correlations. It works. Okay? And I saw it as correlations for many, 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 many years. See? Until I understood what the purpose of this is. Because the purpose of this is to show you Yahweh, our Elohim, as He really is and actually exists. And that's the purpose of this. The purpose of this is not to show that this and this are the same.
Right.
If you just see that this and this are the same, I mean, I'm glad you do, but you have to realize that's not going to sustain you.
Mm-hmm.
You need the next step.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And the next step is Yahweh, our Elohim, as He really is and actually exists.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Now, I don't think I have any other scriptures out, right? So, now let me just do this. I'm going to move this out of the way first. See? What we have on this chart is Elohim. What we have over here with this tabernacle, this is Elohim. What we have over here with this hands, feet, and the body, this is Elohim. But this doesn't look like this, and this doesn't look like this. Because while we put a person in here, see, we did that for your benefit.
Right.
But what's being identified or exemplified in this particular description is that up here you have intelligence, knowledge, and wisdom. Here you have love, beauty, justice. Here you have foundation, power, and strength. And these are attributes. And they are divine attributes. They are invisible attributes. Yet and still the substance of these have a real effect on you and the creation. Now what do I mean by that? Look at, if you fall in love with somebody, just as a manifestation is concerned, it has a real effect on how you operate. Instantly. See, all of a sudden your attention, you could have a whole bunch of buddies. Okay? But if you fall in love with someone, see, all of a sudden that's all you care about. You leave your friend. I mean, you don't dislike your friends, but they're not as important as this that I love. See? And when I say love, I include infatuation on that, because you can fall in and out of love all the time. See? I'm talking about from a physical manifestation. You can fall in love with a man or fall in love with a woman, and people get married and they have kids, for crying out loud. And then all of a sudden someone comes into their life and they just are head over heels over them. And then they say, well, I never really loved this one. You know, and this is the one that I really love. And sometimes this happens 3 or 4 times. Okay? And so eventually we call that an infatuation. We don't call that love, because what we say is love is permanent. You know, well, what do we know? You know, all we experience is the love I just described, the kind of relationship you have when you have, quote, chemistry with somebody. See, and that can wax or wane. And you can think about the women or the men that you've had in your life down through the years, and how you were just, you really would have done anything for them. And now that they're out of your life and they got their own life, you don't even call them on the phone. You don't even care what happens to them. You know, it's completely a different story. Okay? So there's nothing permanent about that experience. Okay? But this love, see, that I just described as infatuation, is a type and a shadow of what's going on here. Give me John 3:16. And maybe see if you need to pick it up at all, Bruce. I think it's 3:16.
It is.
No. For Yahweh so loved the world that he gave his only begotten
Now
Son.
this love that we're talking about, Yahweh's love, is the thing that all the other loves that you experience in your life are manifestations of. Like you love your dog, and you really love your dog. I mean, it's the love of, I mean, they just are warm and they love you, and it just, you can't imagine being without them, but you're going to be. Okay. For the most part, they're they live to be about 12 to 16 years. See? And you generally live longer. So you just got to we got to wrap your mind around that. See? But we love them. But then when you get the next dog, you freaking love that dog. Okay? I'm a family of dogs. I've had dogs since before I had my younger brother. There was always a dog in our family. Always dogs in our family. And the only time I didn't have a dog was when I left home and I didn't have a good place for it. And then I finally got a dog, and that dog was my soulmate. It acted like me, for crying out loud.
It did.
And then that dog died, and I didn't really want dogs again because it was so painful to understand this love. So then we went out and got a couple of dogs. And I was head over heels.
In love.
And it just has kept on going. See? But that kind of love is a manifestation of what we're talking about here in John 3:16. And you felt that. You felt how powerful that is. You felt how devastated, the tears you cried when you lose someone that you love, who has that effect on you. Right. Now, John 3:16.
For Yahweh so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believed in him should not perish, but have everlasting life.
So this love that we're talking about here, see, that's the love that all these other things are just manifestations of. That's Yahweh as he really is and actually exists. Now give me Romans 1:19 and 20.
Romans 1:19, because that which may be known of Yahweh is manifest in them.
Now listen. So someone said this to me when they first read this. I never knew this was in the Bible, because I didn't know anything was in the Bible. And even I had read a lot of it, but I didn't know anything was in it. I read through the words and moved on.
Yeah.
I just read through the words and moved on. And someone said this.
Because that which may be known of Yahweh is manifest in them.
And they said, no, speculated,
No.
theorized about,
No.
guessed about,
No.
had a good feeling in your heart about.
Not that one either.
As far as this Bible is concerned, it is telling you that you can know something about your Creator. Now, we want to help you find and know Yahweh, our Elohim, as he really is and actually exists. We want you to get the very thing that Paul is talking about here. Okay? And Paul, it's something that I wanted to get into in the beginning of the chapter of Acts, and I don't think I'm going to have time to do it, but Paul was a Pharisee, that means he's a scholar of Jewish law. He's a PhD of Jewish law. See? And not only is a PhD of Jewish law, but he was well respected within the ranks of PhDs. He was a PhD of PhDs, a Pharisee of Pharisees. Do you understand? He was a top dog, sat at the head's feet. See? And so every place that Paul went after he received this vision and revelation, the Jews went out of their minds. And that's what you read in this first part of the 17th chapter of Acts, that he went into this one town and the Pharisees got a whole bunch of sketchy people to attack Paul verbally or however it was and rile everybody up. See, and so that he'd leave town. They wound up in jail, for crying out loud. Jason wound up going into security, they say, or in prison for a while because he was going to get run over by the crowd. And so what does Paul do? We read this in the scripture reading. So Paul goes to the next town, and what happens there? The Jews in the first town heard that he had gone to the next town and was preaching the gospel of Yahshua the Messiah, and they went on into the next town and stirred the crew up against Paul again. And then Paul went on into Athens. That's how he wound up at Mars Hill. The Jews had kept chasing him from city to city. Every time he'd come and start telling the truth, they didn't want the people to hear it.
Yeah.
Their desire was that the people would not learn, would not know. And they couldn't say anything against what Paul says.
Yeah.
And you get that in the 7th chapter of Acts with Stephen's declaration before he's stoned. Stephen, before he's stoned, goes through the law and the prophets, death, burial, and resurrection, and preaches the gospel. See? And then they stone him. Well, Paul's there, who knows the gospel and hears the explanation of the stuff he knows. And when he leaves there, he is not the same person as when he stood there at Stephen's stoning.
Right.
Because what you read is that when he's on the road to Damascus and he's accosted, if you will, by Yahshua, in other words, knocked down, and Yahshua says to him, Paul, why are you kicking against the pricks?
Right.
And no one really knows what that means, but what it means is that what he heard Stephen say about how the law and prophets work, that Paul knew. In other words, Paul knew the law and prophets, but did not know how they worked. So he didn't understand the internal principles of the law and prophets, but he knew what they were. Stephen understood the internal law and prophets, but Stephen had never gone to, Bruce, may I please?
Please do.
Jew school.
That's it.
He had never sat at the feet of Gamaliel. You understand? He had never gone to Hebrew school. These people that the Messiah had as disciples couldn't even read and write for the most part. It was rare for people to read and write back then. And so here you had Stephen, after having been with who?
Yeah, sure.
See? After having been with Yahshua. Now listen. Stephen had been with the one who wrote the law and the prophets. Stephen heard from Yahshua what they meant. You read over there, and then he opened up their understanding that they might understand the thing. Luke. You read over there in Luke 24, around the 44th chapter, somewhere in there, that Yahshua had to open their understanding. This was before Pentecost. Open their understanding in all the things that he had done in the 3.5 years before he was crucified. Because this was after the death, burial, and resurrection that he opened their understanding. So now they understood why a lamb had to be slain. Do you understand? And they understood now why there had to be 4 points of blood on a door.
Right.
Because he said, I am the door, and there are 4 points of blood on the door. And this door points to him. And he says this. This is what he says. No man comes unto the Father but by me. So here you got this 4 points of blood on the door, and if you had the 4 points of blood on the door, you understand, then you would not have been killed.
Right.
So you got to go to the mountain where the Father spoke. No man comes unto the Father but by me. See? Now here's an interesting thing. See? When the death angel came over Egypt, oh my. When the death angel came over Egypt, the death angel killed the firstborn of every man and beast. So Pharaoh lost his firstborn son. See? And here's a mystery. There are so many mysteries locked up in this thing that once you begin to see these mysteries, you realize that Dr. Kinley actually did have the same discussion that Paul had on the road to Damascus. Met the same one who explained the same thing. And Stephen, his experience with Yahshua was the same experience that Paul had on the road to Damascus, and it was the same experience that Dr. Kinley had when he had the vision in Revelation. Okay? And that is that he talked directly with Yahweh. Directly with Yahweh Elohim. Now, so Pharaoh himself was not killed. Because Pharaoh went after the Israelites. But the throne was always handed down to the firstborn.
Right.
So something happened in that particular passing on of the throne, see, that was not the firstborn. That Pharaoh was not the firstborn son of his father. See? Huh?
We need a re-election.
Good real election. So what happened to that firstborn son? Well, what you read about here, some 40 years earlier, Moses, who is in Pharaoh's household, Do you understand? He's as a son of Pharaoh, is walking amongst the Israelites, and he sees he sees an Egyptian slaying or smiting a Hebrew.
Right.
See? And so Moses kills this particular Egyptian. Okay? And he flees for his life because he knows his life is going to be at the price of this act. Now look at Moses is as a son of Pharaoh.
Right.
If Moses had killed a normal, everyday Joe Blow Egyptian, Pharaoh would have just said, yeah, another one, it's all right, no problem.
Right.
He's not going to kill a son in his house over killing some low-ranking Egyptian. Okay? That Egyptian that Moses killed was the firstborn son of Pharaoh himself, the one who should have been on the throne when the death angel came through. See? But you can't know that unless you understand how this thing is put together.
Right.
Now, Greg worked with the Garden of Eden back here, and I'm going to take just a couple of more minutes because we started so late. I'll just probably take 5, Dennis, so don't fret. But it talks about over there, I think it's in the 4th, maybe the 3rd or the 4th chapter, where the seed of Eve will bruise the head of the serpent, and the seed of the serpent will bruise the heel of the seed of the woman.
Yes, that's 3.
So the righteous seed hits the head, and the unrighteous seed hits the heel. That's what you pick up. Now I'm back in the Garden of Genesis, but I'm talking about what happened with Moses at that slaying of the Egyptian and how it's being made witnessed or exampled or shown up here when 40 years later this head of Egypt doesn't die. See? So Moses, when Moses was born, he was a goodly child. And when he was named, he said, I'll call him Moses because I drew him out of the reeds. Well, Yahweh had him called Moses because he had been planned right from the start to bring Israel, to draw Israel up out of Egypt. And that's why his name was Moses, because he was doing the drawing. His name and his function go together. See? Well, back then, in order to get Moses out of Egypt, Yahweh had Moses, who represents the seed of righteousness, bruise the head of the serpent. So therefore take out the firstborn son. That's the head of the inheritance. See? And he bruised his head. See? And Moses going into the wilderness, that's just bruised in the heel. Do you understand? And so, but all of these things come together to show you that Yahweh knows what he's doing, and everything that has come together is an invisible spiritual principle that you have never seen at any time with these eyes, because no man has seen Yahweh at any time. But Romans 1:19 and 20, because that which may be known of Yahweh was manifest in them. Now you can pull it as far as this tabernacle is concerned, but what is the reality of that is, and Paul knows this, is that Yahweh manifested in the operation of the Jews all the way down through the law and the prophets his purpose. He had isolated them out as a family. You understand? And so it's been a family affair all along. He isolated these out as a family, and everything that happened to them shows something, a spiritual principle. So look at, so over here then, you had love. Yahweh so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, and you can know something about Yahweh, you understand? So there's your knowledge, and you can take each one of these attributes and find a spiritual principle about it. Why? Because Yahweh our Elohim, as he really is and actually exists, is a spirit embodiment. Now, Dr. Kinley made this statement. He said, it's not a spiritual body. It's a spirit embodiment. In other words, you can't separate the spirit from the body. It's a spirit embodiment. It's not like you. It's not like you get this thing. This thing is. And that gets us right back to the beginning where I was talking about how the Thetans came from outer space, and they could postulate something, and Roman Catholicism has God making everything from nothing. Okay? That really what this whole creation is nothing more and nothing less than the actual spirit of your Creator made manifest. It is spirit materialized. Its source and its substance is actually intelligence, knowledge, wisdom, love, beauty, justice, foundation, power, and strength made manifest. You actually can feel spirit materialized. Okay? And you can't get outside of spirit to look back at spirit to see what it is any more than you can get outside of. You can astral project and you still can't get outside of your own body. Okay? You just can't get away from spirit. You can go down as far as the depths of hell, and there he is. And as up as high as heaven, and there he is. Okay? You can't get away from him. Why? Because he is everything. Okay? And once you begin to understand the operation of spirit in that sense, okay, it makes a whole big difference with how you read the Bible and how you operate in your life. Because no matter who you walk into outside that door, see, that's Yahweh made manifest. And whether you like them or not, they are awarded a certain amount of respect. So anyway, thank you for your time.
I want to thank everybody for coming out and studying with us this evening. We hold classes here every Tuesday and Saturday evening from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. I'd like everyone to rise and be dismissed by the doxology. Now unto him that is able to keep you from falling and to present you faultless before the presence of his glory with exceeding joy. To the only wise Elohim our Savior, through Yahshua the Messiah our Sovereign, belong glory and majesty, dominion and power, both now and forever, let us all say.
Amen.